Nigeria has a housing problem, also got a mortgage finance problem, a combination of a 17 million unit deficit and also a mortgage industry that does not meet the needs of its population means that Africa's largest economy has a long way to go when it comes to mortgages. So what is the solution? Well, joining us from our Abuja studio, Mr. Kunle Faleti. He's the Assistant Vice President, Retail Mortgage Underwriting at Truist, which I think is in Maryland. Joins me now from our Abuja studios. Good afternoon to you, sir. Thank you so much for joining us. So, my first question, why can't the average Nigerian walk into a bank and put down a 20% down payment and walk out with the title to a house?
It's twofold. Number one, the average Nigerian does not have enough savings to come up with 20%. And the second issue there is that the commercial and mortgage banks, they are not geared up for long-term lending. If you say the average home costs 5 million.
Yes, carry on, sir. Carry on.
How long is it going to take to save? You know, affordability. Coming up with the savings, is a great obstacle. How can that be overcome? You have policies or initiatives like mortgage guarantee insurance, which will allow a lower down payment. Actually, putting 20% down is more for the affluent, the upper middle, the upper class. You know, for low income, which the average Nigerian falls in, they require about 3% to 5% down payment. And then banks, their funds are short-term funds. Mortgages are instruments with a tenure of 15 to 25 years. So I think those two issues, the inability of people to come up with savings, the economy is kind of bad. The average Nigerian is poorly paid. So it could take almost 15 years to save up 20% for you to be able to put 20% down on an average home.
Thank you so much for that. So is this a problem that can be solved by the Nigerian government alone, or Nigeria's banks alone, or Nigeria's building developers alone, or it's a combination of all three?
It's a combination of all three and more. In the last couple of weeks, I've had the opportunity to meet with the one-on-one with the Secretary to the Federal Government. I also had a meeting with the Minister of State for Housing. Just last week, it was the 15th edition of the Abuja International Housing Show. I'm a director of AIHS. You know, it brings stakeholders together. Mortgage banks, real estate developers, policymakers. So everybody has a role, a critical role to play. Government's role pretty much is to create the enabling environment. And I think in the last 7 to 10 years, we've seen progress. It's slow, but it's better than what it was 10 years ago. We have an initiative like the Nigerian Housing Finance Program, which has four components. One of the components saw the emergence of the Nigerian Mortgage Refinance Company, NMRC, which is supposed to be a secondary market financier to buy back retail mortgages from commercial and mortgage banks. However, NMRC's impact is being limited because of the fact that there are no mortgages to refinance. On the part of real estate developers, they have been doing a lot. You know, in most instances, the real estate developers plays the role of government, if I may. They provide the road, they provide the infrastructure, and sometimes they provide creative financing because of inability of mortgage banks to, provide financing. A key stakeholder, which I think has been left out in the mix, is the credit bureau reporting companies. They form a very critical, they play a very critical role and important factor in the housing finance mix. There is no one cap fits all. Everybody has to work together towards the same goal and objective. Government, real estate developers, community banks, mortgage banks, commercial banks, and also the credit bureau companies.
Excellent stuff. I do want to touch on that last point while we're talking about solutions here, and I'm glad you mentioned the credit bureaus. Back in 2017, Vice President Osibanjo passed or signed into law a movable asset registry bill while the president was away. And that was supposed to allow for individuals to be able to, use portable assets, if you will, as collateral to get loans. And that was way back in 2017. We're now in 2021. Credit bureaus exist in Nigeria. And, when folks want to get a loan, you can get a credit report and go there. But it doesn't seem to filter through to being able to, develop the kind of credit report that a bank or a mortgage bank can look at and then, use to determine whether or not one is able to get financing. So what needs to be done, further beyond that?
Information. I believe that we have 3 credit bureaus operating in Nigeria at the moment, and like you rightly said, they've been working. And the central bank at some point came out with a policy that before credit is extended for home financing, you must obtain 2 reports from the 3 repositories. But you can only get what you give. Commercial banks, mortgage banks must be reporting the performance of loans to these credit bureaus. If information is not being reported to them, then there wouldn't be any material for the credit bureau to translate into meaningful information. Over and beyond that, I think in the last couple of years, the introduction of the BVN, the NIN, that will narrow down personal identification. So I think we're working in the right direction, and as much as possible, we need to continuity is important, especially on the part of government. You don't want a situation where government A introduces a policy and then leaves office. Government B comes in and ignores or just abandons. Continuity of policy is really, really important if we're going to ultimately achieve the objective of having a sustainable housing finance system in the country.
Great stuff. Okay, when you mentioned the forum that took place in Abuja, of which you're a director as far as housing is concerned, you mentioned all the stakeholders and the roles that they have to play. What are developers telling you about the amount of building materials that are imported into Nigeria and the role that foreign exchange plays? How much of a factor is that in what we're seeing as far as housing costs, in your estimate?
It is a big factor. For 4 days, 4 nights, I was with the president of the Real Estate Developers Association of Nigeria. I was with the CEOs of the big real estate developers across the country. You have Octo5, you have Eximia Reality, Brains and Amas, Cosgrove, Adron Homes. It's the same story. The cost of production. One way to look at it is, can we use alternative building materials? Can we do without cement? Even if we're going to go with cement, what can be done to bring down the cost? I know for a fact that there are some partnerships. The family home funds, as an example, is working with the likes of Dangote Cement, where they negotiate almost 50%, kind of tax break. Instead of buying the cement at 10 naira, they pay 5 naira for it. But, I think in the long run, we've got to look outside the brick and mortar. We have to start thinking of alternative building materials. Can we go manufactured housing? Can we go modular? Can we use containerized homes? Those are we need to start thinking in that direction. Cement will always be cement. Cement monopoly will be cement monopoly. But what can the industry do? How can we circumvent those challenges? So those are the things the Real Estate Developers Association are looking into. And I know for a fact that they're working assiduously on this.
Okay, excellent. Earlier, when you answered a previous question I asked you, you said information. So we take a lot of data on this show from around the world. We're always talking about housing starts in the United States, which is updated monthly. Do we have a data issue? I mean, you're talking about. Okay, yes, we are answering the question on credit bureaus and credit. You're talking about what needs to be funneled to the from the credit bureaus to the mortgage banks to get information. What about data on construction? What about us having the equivalent of the housing starts data in the United States? How far would that go towards giving us a better read of, like, for example, the deficits in housing units and so on and so forth? What would that contribute towards mortgages and the mortgage industry?
The contribution, it's immeasurable. The benefits of having accurate statistics is, you can't even measure the importance. Who will provide the information? It cuts across. You mentioned the United States and the housing stats. For national, you have the National Association of Realtors that provides the national average, the national statistics. However, every state, every local government has a responsibility. The housing stats in Las Vegas, as an example, is provided by the Nevada State Association of Realtors. So if we're talking about the Nigerian context, it's got to be localized. An agency like the Federal Bureau of Statistics can only provide so much. The local governments are closer to the communities, so you have the Association of Housing Corporations of Nigeria. They can leverage on institutions like that. Every state government in Nigeria has a Ministry of Housing. Some of them even have multiple agencies, beyond the primary Ministry of Housing. So these agencies should be charged with the responsibility of providing housing data, housing statistics in their communities. This information will now be collated, and then on a monthly basis, we can have national averages. It's not going to come from the federal government. It's not the federal government's responsibility to provide housing stats. And I think this should be a private sector driven initiative. And I'm so happy that during the 15th Abuja International Housing Show, we had collaboration, we had commitment from all the stakeholders, so that moving forward, we're going to be getting information.
Fantastic stuff. Great conversation. Mr. Kunle Faleti, Assistant Vice President, Retail Mortgage Underwriting at Truist. So much. Very informative conversation. Thank you so much. We'll have to have you back.